Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lisa Elvin Staltari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. I'm so glad you came to the channel. And over the last several years, we've been examining les filles du roi, les filles mariées, among other things. I do travel videos and all kinds of different things. But my main focus over the last several years has been really getting to know each one of these extraordinary women as they tell us the story of Quebec. And they truly allow us to see how they built the country or the province of Quebec. But ultimately, all of the descendants have gone in all different directions. So in many respects, they really are the founding mothers and grandmothers of North America in many respects. But before we begin, let me show you ways you can support the channel. The first three keep you in the know: subscribe, like, and notify. The next three are ways to help the channel grow. We have Coffee and Patreon, which are external platforms, and we also have my PayPal button on my website, How Roots Will Travel. By the way, on my website, you can also access the index and also have the really, really easy links to all the videos I've done. We're doing number 262 today. So all of the previous videos are on there as well. So have a look at that. And with that being said, let's get started and get to know our filles du roi of this episode. Now we come to episode 262 of Elisabeth Doucinet. She comes to us as a viewer request, but in my files, I do have one of my dearest friends from high school. This is also her great grandmother. Let's get to know Elisabeth a little bit better. So Elisabeth was born in 1647 in the city of La Rochelle, France. She was baptized as Protestant. Her parents were Pierre Doucinet and Florence Gartou. Now, La Rochelle is part of the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region, and inside of that is the Charente-Maritime département. La Rochelle was founded during the 10th century and became a very important harbor in the 12th. Until the 15th century, La Rochelle was to be the largest French harbor on the Atlantic coast, dealing mainly in wine, salt, and cheese. Truly the good stuff. The name, actually, La Rochelle, was first recorded in 961 as Rupella, from a Latin meaning little rock. La Rochelle has one of the richest histories of all the towns of France, from its beginnings as an area where the Knights of Templar had their strongest base, where Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet in 1152, who would become King of England as Henry II in 1154, thus putting La Rochelle under Plantagenet or English rule until Louis VIII recaptured it in the 1224 siege of La Rochelle. During the Plantagenet control of the city in 1185, Henry II had the Vauclair castle built, remains of which are still visible in the Place de Verdun. From 1568, as could be expected, La Rochelle would become a center for the Huguenots. It was in La Rochelle that the Protestant revolutions occurred and created the uprising that would become known as the Siege of La Rochelle. Throughout the 1600s, the Huguenots were expelled from La Rochelle. Just a side note, if any of you have been to New Rochelle in New York, guess who founded that? They were refugees from exactly this place. So La Rochelle has really, really been instrumental for many reasons, not the least of which is the immigration to the New World of the Protestants who were trying to escape. So we don't know exactly when Elisabeth would come. We believe it's 1666. Her sister Marguerite had arrived as a fille mariée in 1662. And we know that this was the period of time in La Rochelle that was very dangerous. So it is logical to assume that they were trying to find a safe place to live. And Elisabeth was worth about 200 pounds. The groom that she would select and who selected her, and I'm not sure they didn't already know each other, but he also was from La Rochelle and he was also Protestant. He was born in 1644. His parents were Isaac Bedard and Marie Gérard. Now, when did he come and in what circumstance? Jacques would come to New France in 1661, so we really can understand, really, they were escaping. And they came, his mother and father, and 5 siblings, and then Jacques, all came to New France to create a safe haven for themselves. He would be confirmed in 1662. So this means that you couldn't be Protestant and live in New France, but you could become a Catholic, if you will, and at least have that safety net. Presumably, Elisabeth would also have been confirmed, and she and Jacques would be married October 4th, 1666, at Quebec City. They would, of course, spend some time at Quebec City. We have the 1667 census, where we have Jacques, 23, and Elisabeth Doucinet, 18, for Arpin-Valard, so that equals to about maybe 2 acres of land. Presumably this would have been something his father would have given him, that sort of thing. So let's explore a little bit about Quebec City. It was founded in 1608 by Samuel de Champlain. It is the capital of Quebec. About 500,000 people live there. And we have here 2 pictures of places that would have existed during the time of Jacques and Elisabeth. The top picture is of La Maison Jacquet, as it was called, and it was built in 1675. It is the oldest surviving private residence. And if you'd like to tour it, it's home to a very famous restaurant, appropriately called Aux Anciens Canadiens. Now on the bottom we have Le Petit Champlain, which is the shopping center, which claims to be the oldest commercial district in North America. Then we have a depiction of what Quebec would have looked like in 1700 and a more vintage map, probably from the 1950s, that existed of how Quebec looked at that time. The family would settle at Charlebourg eventually, and Charlebourg is a borough now of Quebec City, but at the time it was its own very special place. The origins of Charlebourg begin with the concession of the Seigneurie of Notre-Dame-des-Anges in 1626, of which Charlebourg was part of. In 1665, the new intendant of justice, our famous Jean Talon, set out to establish 3 new villages further north on that plateau. You can imagine that the Jesuits who owned the area, who were the seigneurs, were not pleased. The first of the villages consisted of a 25 arpents, remember that's acres, and it was lined up in a square. So Charlebourg was set up, Bourg Royal and Petit-Stoleng. So you can see Charlebourg is the bigger one. And it's laid out kind of in a star or wheel shape with a small square in the middle, which represented the church and more the communal area of the town. And all of the land pointed toward that, giving it a star-shaped pattern. And so we have these 3 towns that were built this way, and I believe there's only one other in Alberta, I think, that was designed this way. So it's very unique. And even in the 1960s, you saw from an aerial view that it was exactly laid out still to this day in that same manner. The church that eventually grew, Saint Charles de Borromée, this is the current church. And on the right side of your screen, you have a depiction of what it looked like in 1696. On the bottom, we see Charlebourg. It looks like it's really far from Quebec, but it isn't. It is now amalgamated into, I believe in 1976 is when they did that. But it was and is one of the most charming areas in all of Quebec because it really reflects that kind of specialness, especially because of its layout. So it really needs to be visited. In 1681, we took a census. Jacques Bedard was a carpenter, 36. His wife, 32, Elisabeth. And Etienne, François, Elisabeth, Jacques, Madeleine, Pierre. They have 1 gun. They have 2 bêtes à cornes, which means 2 horned animals, and 12 arpents, about 9 to 10 acres of land. So the family would grow. It would grow by 17. Let's have a look at the children. Their first child, Marie, would die before the 1681 census. Etienne would marry Marie-Jeanne Villeneuve and have two children, both of whom made it to adulthood before his early death at 33. Charles would die in infancy. François would marry Marie-Madeleine Auclair and have five children, all of whom made it to adulthood. He would then marry Marguerite Coeur and have one child who would survive. Marguerite's mother was a fille du roi who we have not yet profiled, Elisabeth Marchand. Elisabeth would marry Julien Brousseau and have three children. Unfortunately, none of them survived. Jacques would marry Elisabeth Renaud and have seven children, all of whom survived. Elisabeth's mother was Marie de la Mare, who we featured in episode 200. Louis, we don't have any more information of, but we are pretty certain that he died before the 1681 census. We have Marie-Madeleine, who married Louis Renaud and had 11 children, all of whom made it. Louis's mother was also Marie de la Mare, who we featured in episode 200. Pierre would pass away at age 25. Catherine would marry Georges Allard and have three children, all of whom survived. Georges' mother was Jeanne Languet, who we featured way back in episode 94. Françoise would pass away in infancy. Thomas would marry Jeanne Françoise Huppé and have seven children, all of whom survived. Charles would marry Suzanne Elisabeth Huppé and have 13 children, 8 of whom survived. Marguerite would marry René Allary and have 8 children, 6 of whom survived. Marianne would die at 22 years of age, unmarried. Marie-Jeanne would marry Joseph Renaud and have 2 children, both of whom survived. And yes, his mother was Marie de la Mare, who we featured in episode 200. So you see, 3 of the Renaud children married 3 of the Bedard children. So that is a link between those families. Joseph would marry Nicolas Jacques and have 3 children, all of whom survived before her own early death at 25. And now we come to the end of the love story. Elisabeth would pass away in 1710 at the age of 63. She and Jacques would have been married an astonishing 44 years, and she would leave us in 1729 with 134 descendants to go forth into the world. Jacques himself would die a mere 7 months later at the age of 67, and they are both buried in Charlebourg. As befits such a prominent family, we do find a biographical sketch on Isaac Bedard, the ancestor, and we can find it on volume 2 of our French-Canadian Ancestors. I always like to recommend our free French-Canadian Ancestors Facebook page. They have all the files, so if you can't get your hands on this particular book, you can at least download the copy. And once you are on part of the group, if you're lucky enough to be able to have a library that has editions of this, thank your lucky stars. So have a look at that. It is volume 2 and in our French-Canadian Ancestors by Thomas J. Laforêt, which is a translation from the original. Ends episode 262. Elisabeth and Jacques were a lovely couple and had so many children and really were among the pioneers at Charlebourg, and the Bedards of all. That name is truly very prominent name in Quebec to this day. I grew up with Bedards, so it really is a very prominent family, and they connected with so many others. So I suspect many of you will find a Bedard in your tree, and that would be Elisabeth, who was the matriarch. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I also want to say thank you to my patrons and supporters and subscribers. You are all amazing, amazing. So thank you so very much for your contributions and your support. It really means the world to me. And with that, I will say adieu and au revoir until I see you on the next episode of Les Filles du Roi.